Y'all, Morgan Harper Nichols is one of my faves. And if you've only been following me for a short period of time, you may not know that she has been on the podcast before. This is time number 3. So now I'm actually like,
Wow.
oh yeah, we're friends. We're really friends. The first
Yes.
time, Morgan, I don't know if you remember, but I was telling you, oh my gosh, like I'm totally fangirling right now. And then you said to me, no, I'm fangirling
Yes, I still think that is so wild that we were at an event together, and
Yep.
I think I was doing music and you were speaking, but we ended up not meeting.
Mm-mm.
And I was like, "Oh, I'm so bummed." But little did I know that, the years would
Yeah.
pass and we
The
would
years would
continue
pass.
to cross paths.
I know. Again, multiple times. I am just
Yes.
honored to have you here with me today. You are, as I've said before, and I hope you don't get tired of hearing it and being affirmed by it. You are so talented, and your gift,
Mm,
not just to be an artist, and to have the emotions resonate through color and
mm,
shape and form, but to be able to connect that to words that resonate with the
mm,
color and shape and form that you can create is just a double layer of gifting, and we all get to benefit from the thing that you do with one person in mind. I know that in the
mm,
past you've shared that when you are writing pieces, that when you are designing pieces to share, that you're
mm,
thinking about that one person who got into your DMs and shared something with you, and the response to that one person is what we all get to benefit from.
mm,
Your the overflow of your gifting to us is just unmeasured. Even
mm,
when I shared with you on that first podcast how one of your songs, That's the Story I'll Tell,
mm,
that was a song that resonated deeply with my cousin Winter, who passed away at the young age of 38 in 2018. And when you told me how you were or where you were, the circumstances surrounding the song, you just went into the kitchen. It was a Sunday morning, and then this song was born. That it was just the overflow of you operating in the
mm.
spaces that
Yeah.
you've created to create in. And so you have this new book out, and it's called Pieces of Practice, which, of course, it the all of the visuals say and speak peace to me. You know, before I even open
Mm,
the page, it's
yeah.
just yes, this is a Morgan Harper Nichols book for sure.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you
what I
so much.
think you have cultivated, and I'm not saying perfectly, but what I think from the outside looking in, that you have cultivated well is your own well of peace so that you actually have something to pour out for everyone else. That you were in the kitchen on the Sunday morning and the song came. That you are not on social
Mm,
media all the time doing all the things, but you're
yeah.
in your DM and you'll select one and then you close
Mhm.
the app and then you come to
Yeah.
write. That you have been
Mhm.
diligent about protecting your peace and making the
Yes.
protection of that piece a practice. And that's why there's room for overflow. So I just want to thank you for not just being an example and not just sharing what this means to have peace be a
Mhm.
practice, but to show us by example the blessing
Mhm.
that can come out of a life that's lived that practices peace. And so, thanks for being an example to me, honey, because I'm not. I'm not.
Oh,
I'm a striver to the nth degree. I look at Jamie and I'm like, okay, one day she's doing something on YouTube, and another day she's making up a song, and on the other day she's got her video thing going, and I'm like, oh, that's me, honey. Just show me all the things, all the, and she produces out of that too. I mean, it's it's not,
mhm.
but I do think the example that you give for peace is one that I've been able to learn from. I'm
Mm,
so curious. I'm so curious. Is this natural for you? Is peace and the
mm,
pursuit of peace and the practice of peace natural for you, secondhand, easy?
mm. That's such a good question, and, I just have to say, and it's connected to that answer. I have to say I'm so grateful that you just the way you just poured into me, like, I'm sitting here like, "Okay, Morgan, don't cry." That just you have no idea how much I needed that,
Oh, good.
and it was interesting because the other day I was kind of in like I was kind of just had a whole lot of stuff going on, and just running around doing everything and just feeling a little bit like, okay, I feel like I could take a break, like a long break right now, but I can't. I have stuff to do, and just that whole thing. And then my sister actually texted me, Jamie, And so my sister edits my podcast. She was like, I was going through and you said this. So I just wanted to send it to you so you remember. And apparently I said it, but I forgot. She sent it back to me and she said, I firmly believe that I am at my best when I'm able to create and share from a place of overflow. When I am filled up to the brim with energy, then I am able to create and share without so much stress and anxiety attached to it. And I was
Mm,
like, "Oh,
mm,
that is what I said. I did say that." And for me, that was just such a reminder of like, it's like, yes, I have to take that time away. And when
mm,
I do take that time away to just be still and rest and be filled myself, then when it comes time to share or to write or to serve, then it really does feel natural. It really
mhm,
does.
mhm,
It doesn't feel forced. But that only happens if I take time, and often more time than I want to. And oftentimes I can see in those spaces where I might be feeling anxious, stressed, frustrated, or whatever, I can typically look and say, okay, what have you not been saying no to lately?
mm,
What have you been feeling? What have you not been asking for help with, Morgan? What have you been feeling like it's all on you to figure this thing out? Like there's even times with my son. I have a toddler son, and there's times where like he'll he'll just say mommy, and it's something daddy could easily do, and daddy is actually right next to him. And instead of saying like, oh, ask your father, I'm just like, let me go, I gotta go get it. And there's so many little things like that where I just feel that pressure of like, well,
mm.
somebody breathed in my direction, so I guess that means I have to do it. So yeah, I guess the answer is a little bit of both. It does feel natural at times to just be in this peaceful state where I'm like, yes, I really do feel at peace with what I'm doing, but it only comes when I've given that time, away to rest and be rejuvenated. So yeah.
Well, you are in a season where there probably are a lot of no's to give.
Mhm.
You are everywhere, girl. You are every stinking where. If you weren't already on social media everywhere, because people share your content, and if you didn't have books that were beautiful that were being distributed everywhere, you have your work, not just your book, not just your writing, your cards. I saw them at Magnolia. I've seen your stuff at Target and Starbucks, Anthropology, Athletica, Aerie, Barnes and Nobles, TJ Maxx. You are everywhere. And I know that a lot of that happens because you'll give one yes, and then there are other people who do their jobs to put things in places. But when you have your stuff, your creation, which is an overflow of who you are, on demand by people who want more and want the next season's collection, and what are you
Mhm.
creating? And then you've created a machine that is feeding off of your creativity that
Yeah.
comes from your place of rest, but now it's a machine.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. Oh
so
my.
I can't imagine what it looks like for you to assess the opportunities. And as wonderful as those opportunities are, to figure out which ones are a go and which ones are a no, because they all come back to you for production.
Mhm.
Has
Yeah.
that been difficult to navigate? Has the success, because the success got created
Yeah.
from your overflow, has the success been difficult to navigate in terms of how you continue to protect your space and place?
Yes, yes. I'm gonna be 100% transparent with you. It's been one of the hardest things I've had to do in my life so far. It is so hard. Like, I can't even find, like, a poetic word to put in the place of hard. It is so hard. I am again, my poor husband, he just hear it all because I mean, we both work from home. And I'm just like, "You know what? Here's why I'm saying no to this. You know what? Here's why I'm saying yes to that. Never mind. I changed my mind. Hold on. What if we it that's all day. That's all day. It's either him or my sister. Like I call her and I'm just like, Jamie, hold on. Like, what do you think? And it is so hard because it's exactly what you just said. I started this
Mm,
because I was trying to kind of get away from the chaos, get away from the pressure, get away from like the hustle and bustle because I was I was I was kind of fully integrated into the entertainment industry and music, and I just didn't have the energy for it. That's just a short
Mm-hmm.
version of the story. It just takes a lot of energy
Mm-hmm.
to get
Mm-hmm.
yourself out there, get your music out there, network, hang out with people, go on tours, hop on stage for this show, for this set, all this
Yeah.
stuff. It's a lot. And I think it comes more naturally to some, maybe personality types than others. It does not that does not come naturally to me. Like if you ask me to hop on a stage and do anything, that's not natural. Like whatever comes out of my mouth from that moment forward, that would not just be, oh, Morgan, she's just flowing. It's like, yeah, with a whole lot of prayer and a whole lot of, like, Lord, just help me get through this. So that whole world, it just didn't come natural to me. So when I started, writing poetry and art and just being able to kind of like
Mm.
passively put it out there, that felt like, oh, wow, I could just do this forever.
You could
But the
breathe.
Yes, I felt like I could breathe. But because it energized me, it was something I could do a lot of. And now that a lot of it got out there, that increased the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities and people, to the point that, I got to a point, I would say probably just literally a month before the first lockdown started, where I felt like my schedule looked exactly like what it had looked like back when I was in the music days. And so yeah, that was a nice clean break in that way when the lockdown did start. In that one way, it was a huge positive for me
Mm-hmm.
because it really forced me to see that, hey, this is something that you have to address and you might have to wrestle with it for a while,
Yeah.
because it's not going to be like a clear yes or clear no. Like, okay, if an email comes for this person, it's always a yes or it's always a no. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like on a practical note, what it's kind of turned into is really just trying not to draw conclusions, honestly,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because sometimes in the past, I've had situations where someone very well meaning, like a company, might reach out and want to do something. And I believe in the initiative or I say yes to it. And then I realize when I'm in it, oh, that wasn't right for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it could be easy to just internalize it and just like get upset. Well, why did they ask me to do it anyway? Or, oh, what were they expecting? Da, 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 da. And what I found is I'm like, you know what? A lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times if you can communicate to people, that's just not a good fit for me.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in that mission, but that's just not going to be a good fit for me right now. I just can't take it on. No, but thank you. A lot of times people are like, "Oh, okay," and they go on to the next thing. It's not always that way,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm learning that it's not going to be just like a clear, easy solution. But I'm also learning that there is grace for me to navigate that. And perhaps I'm more equipped to
Mm-hmm.
navigate that than I at times believe I am.
Well, I love that as a response. We're always in search of, or I'll speak for myself, I'm always in search of a different way I can say no.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so that's a great way. Like, this
Uh-huh.
is a great initiative. I think this is going to
Uh-huh.
help a lot of people. I'm really excited about the
Yeah.
idea. But right now, or in this season, it's just not
Mhm.
a good fit for me. And you
Yeah.
drawing a line between something that could be a good fit for someone else, it's
Mhm.
not a bad thing in and of itself. It's just not
Yeah.
a good fit for me right now with my
Mhm.
responsibilities, with my desires, with my current commitments.
Mhm.
And they don't have to know I don't want to do it, but
Yeah.
because sometimes that's the
Yeah.
answer too. But it's
Yeah.
not a
It's
good
they
fit
don't
for
have
me right now.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
I remember years ago, I reached out to someone for something, I can't remember. This was years ago, and they said, and to this day, I remember this organization saying this to me, and this is before I was doing any of the stuff I'm doing today. And they were like, "Oh, we're not able to do that, but we're cheering you on. We see what you're doing." And I
Mm,
have every time I see
I love
their
that.
brand name, I'm like, they're cheering me on. And who else? It could have just been an intern saying it.
But that's
Like, just
good.
but that was, to me, I was like, "You know what? I appreciate that." Like, yes, they're not able to be a part of this, but they see me and it's someone I look up to, and I'm like, "That's awesome." So, yeah, there's definitely ways to do that.
I can't imagine that there are that many people that you have in your life who have been in the position that you're in, where there are so many
Yeah.
requests coming, and it's not just to do something, to show up and do
Mhm.
something. It
Yeah.
requires you to create, which is a different
Mhm.
muscle than just showing up to do something at a date and
Yeah.
time. That navigating this, and I know you have great wisdom in your life. Your parents are awesome, and I know that your husband is stalwart and dependable for you. But have you needed mentorship to say no,
Mhm.
guidance and direction for what are opportunities, that may have a short-term discomfort, but it's worth the
Yeah.
stretch right now, like
Mhm.
navigating those, because I think, anytime we're living life, we have the propensity to live at extremes.
Mhm.
Everything's yes, and because I got sick of saying yes to everything, then everything's a no, and saying
Yeah.
no to everything isn't necessarily always the way either. There's the
Yeah.
knowing of when is the yes and when is the no, or when is the
Oh,
time and
yeah.
when it's not the time. So, as you've developed that muscle in your life, as you've been blessed with the circumstances of having lots of people wanting your overflow, what
Mhm.
does it look like for you to get help?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, apart from the
Yeah.
venting, I mean, the venting
Oh, I
is
love,
real and
yeah.
it's important. Like my
Yes.
husband, I'd be like, can you listen? I don't need you to
Yeah.
solve it.
Yeah.
I don't need you to even give me a solution. I
Yes.
just need you to listen. I could pay somebody, I could go to therapy, but I don't even
Yeah.
need them to tell me anything. I just need
Mhm.
somebody who's going to
Mhm.
listen to me. Or I tell my
Mhm.
daughter, I just need you to listen. Just listen. Well, what does that look like for you to process or to receive counsel in this
Oh
unique
my
season?
goodness. Oh, I'm so glad you asked that because it is a different thing than, like you said, venting or, or like business advice. Like it's a
Yeah.
whole other component to have someone in like a mentorship role. And that was something that I have always wanted but didn't have for a very long time. I just didn't know how to go about it. Like I remember specifically, like in college, like there are professors I would look up to, and then I just never knew, like, how to approach them or just say anything. But over the past 2 years, actually, I have had two women who are I mean at least they're at least 30 years older than me, and and one on a very regular basis and the other semi-regular basis, who have very just clearly been able to give me guidance and and encouragement and wisdom that just leaves me saying, "Oh, okay." That's what I needed to hear. And that has been so new to me but so needed. And I'm like, yeah, I got to make sure I always have this now. Like, it just makes me wonder, how differently my 20s could have been. If, because like you said, it's like, you have family, I have support system within my family, which that's a huge blessing. And, not everybody even has that.
Yeah.
I'm super grateful for that. But yeah, that's a different layer that is very new, but I'm super grateful for it. And I don't see myself not having
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like of all the things that's taught me is, these two women, I'll think about them at different, even when we're not talking, I'll think about them and I'll think about how I'm like, one of the big words that's come up for me is longevity.
Yeah.
And when you're sitting under someone who's older than you can kind of see like, oh, it takes time to
It
get to
takes
that.
time.
It's like decades, like actual decades. And it's like I'm sitting here, I'm 32 years old, like feeling like I gotta have it all figured out. And
Yeah.
people are coming to me like, what's your advice on this? What's your advice on this? I'm like, I just got here. I'm like, I don't I'm like I'm like, if one more person asks me about parenting advice, I'm like, y'all know my child is two. 2.
But you're Morgan Harper
It's like, "Oh,
Nichols.
you have 2 kids?" "No, I have 1
Yeah,
and he
but
is
they
2
just
years
all they
old."
know is that they've sampled all of your wisdom and your soul stirring depth about
Yes.
life altering things. And they're like,
Yeah.
surely you can tell
I'm
me
like
how to parent. Like you just have become the
Go
source
talk
for
I'm
all
like, "Go
things.
talk to my mom." Like, I keep telling my mom, I'm like, "Mom, you got to get active on
Listen, they're not
Instagram."
ready for your mother. They're
I know
not.
they're not.
Listen,
I
I
know.
was not ready for your mother. I was not. I called her one. I don't even know why I called her. Oh, I think were we talking about? Maybe we were talking about parenting and homeschooling. I think. I think I talked to
Yeah.
Jamie one time and she said you should call her. Anyway, I called your mother and she is a no nonsense. Bottom
Yeah.
line, I am not giving you extra words. I'm going to tell you what you need to know. I mean, listen, the people need to hear from your mother.
Yeah.
Seriously. She might blow their mind,
Yeah, I know,
but she would
but
shoot
it'll
straight.
keep them busy for a few months or a few years. I'm like, it's a selfish thing. I'm like, I'm trying to take some of the pressure off me. I'm like,
Yes.
"Go talk to her." But yeah, it's just been so good to be able to see someone like in the future, like in a way it almost feels like seeing myself in the future. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, the pressure is off." Like the pressure is off to not have to be all these things to everybody. Like I
Yeah.
just can't be that way. I've even noticed as a result of that, my role models, people who I'm inspired by have changed because I feel like I used to look at my peers and what they were doing. But now I'm looking at women who are authors who are in their 50s and 60s because then I'm able to see, oh, like they have longevity, like they've had to learn how to pace
Yeah.
themselves and take sabbaticals and take time off and do all these things that you just don't have in the earlier part of life. So yeah, I've even started to kind of catch myself when I see myself doing even, and it's not even just age, but like I'll give you an example. So there are some people on Instagram who are actually a little bit older than me, but I see their work and I'm just like, wow, it's so amazing. Look at what they're doing. Oh my gosh, like they have more followers than me. Like they're doing all these things, da, 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 da. And it's just like, but Morgan, how long have they been doing that? Like that's been going on for 5 years. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have to think about it in terms of like 10 years, 20 years. It's like, this is just one iteration of what they're doing. It's like, yes, we do things that may explode and be huge, but then we also have seasons where we're like, yeah, I'm just going to go off in the corner and start something new or whatever. So, I feel like you only get that when you've lived long enough. And I
Yeah.
haven't lived long enough. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep listening, keep listening.
Well,
Yeah.
I love the idea. I love when you said, I used to look at women who were my peers because that's the
Mhm.
first thing that we do. We're
Mhm.
looking around to say, am I okay? Like, do I,
Mhm. Yeah.
how am I doing in life? And even if it's like
Yeah.
not a destructive comparison, but a healthy comparison, like,
Mhm.
just how am I tracking? But then you've switched because you're thinking, I don't need to know how I'm tracking with those who are with me. I need to see how
Mhm.
I'm tracking with
Mhm.
those who have been where I am.
Yeah.
And what decisions have they made? What lessons have they learned?
Mhm.
What would they wish they had done differently? And backwards engineer that information into
Yeah.
today. And I love how the
Yeah.
examples that you gave were about pacing, sustainability, sabbaticals. Because if we look at our peers, we're all in a race.
Mm.
Like everybody, the whole dynamic of social media says, where are you
Mm.
at? How long did it take you? And what do I
Yeah.
have to do to get my pace up to speed? Looking
Yeah.
ahead says, what you built over decades. You weren't rushing
Mhm.
and you weren't putting up
Yeah.
7 and 8 pieces of social media a day
Yeah.
either. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's a healthier comparison, I
Oh,
think.
yeah.
Are
Mhm.
these women who have been in your life for a while, or are these women that you specifically sought out because you realized your need to have that perspective in your life?
Yeah, so one
Or both?
is yeah, it's actually both pretty new, and came through, um, social media connections at first, and me just having to bravely reach out and say, I really look up to you, I admire you, and here's, here's where I'm at. And me just, I'm like, I don't even know where it's going to go from here. Like maybe it'll just go in their spam folder and, whatever, overthinking everything. And in both of these different ways, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, let's talk. Like, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. Like, I want to know more from where you're at. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, that's the benefit of them having that. Like, they know what like what I'm looking for.
Hmm.
I didn't have to really spell it out. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm available Wednesdays, from 1 to 3. And
Uh-huh.
it's like, oh, that part gets worked out. Like,
Yeah.
just focus on the connection and that those, the, yeah, it just ended up being people who are
I
relatively
love how you just
newer.
said my message is gonna get stuck in their spam
I
box.
know.
Like this is what I mean. This is what we all think, right? When we
Yeah.
message someone, and I know it's so
Mhm.
healing for somebody to hear you say, "I was
Yeah.
afraid I was gonna get stuck."
No, I just had another one like that last week. It was someone because so we were just before this we were talking about kind of some of my little nerdy art adventures, and I saw someone on TikTok making some really cool art, and I was just like, oh, I want to learn from this person, and I emailed and I still had that same thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm such a nuisance. Why am I emailing this person? And they emailed back. They were like, oh my gosh, this is
They're
so
like,
cool.
Morgan
I
DM'd
just I don't know.
me.
I don't know, y'all. I don't know why I do that, but I do.
But here's
But
the
yeah.
thing. I think, I love how you use the word nuisance because that's
Mhm.
how I feel. Like I'll
Yeah.
DM somebody, I want them to be on the podcast, and I'll say, "Hey, you may not know who I am." I mean, if it's
Yeah.
really important, I don't
Yeah.
ever name drop. But if it's
Yeah.
really important, I'll be like, "You may know my sister, or maybe you know my dad." It's like I would really, but I do feel that way. I'm feeling
Yes.
like
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
inviting them to be a guest on the show. I want to talk to them. I want to share with my audience. And they probably, I'm just an irritating pea underneath the 10
Oh no.
mattresses because who would want to, I mean, like these are the thoughts that I have. And I think it's healing for other
Mhm.
people who experience a disruption of their peace when they're pursuing something that's
Mhm.
important to them, to
Yeah.
know that even people who have a good track record with pursuing peace as you do
Mhm.
still have
Yeah.
to wrestle with those same intermittent, even if minor, moments of
Oh my
anxiety.
goodness.
you know
Yeah. That's
it's
so true
important.
because it's every day. And this is something that, I try to write about, implicitly, but, in poetry, but I hope it comes across, very direct as well. It's like, I am very aware, as other people are as well, of just how the sheer amount of messages that we receive on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm.
And so many of them are not positive. So
Mhm.
many of those messages make you question if you have the right to speak up, or if you have the ability to just be yourself in this world. And, for me, with my autism diagnosis since last year, I've become even more aware of it, of just like,
Mhm.
wow,
Mhm.
there's
Mhm.
so many messages in society around like what a parent is supposed to look like,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
what a 30 something is supposed to be doing with their life at X amount of age.
Mhm.
I'm in this space right now where I kind of hear both sides. A lot of people who are like, no, I don't want a traditional life, or whatever, and the other half's like, only way is this traditional. You need to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. It's like, why? There's a lot of noise, and
It's a
I
lot of
think that
noise.
that ends up getting. I know for me, that ends up getting to me sometimes indirectly. And then I think it comes out in those moments where I'm reaching out to someone and I'm like, is this version of me going to be, is this person going to be okay with me? Because
Mm.
maybe this is how they perceive, because some people have a negative comment. There's a whole like joke um genre of like making fun of blue checks on Instagram and Twitter, like, oh, those people with the blue checks, like they don't know nothing, da, 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 like the little verification check.
They're not
So
living they're not living the lives the rest of us
yeah,
are living.
exactly. Yeah, I have seen meanings of just like, don't be getting your wisdom from those blue checks on Instagram. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, and it's like those little things, like they just get, and it's like, oh, is this person gonna think I'm, trying to like use my name or my blue check, to talk to them? So yeah, that's just a lot to work through. But I think what matters is like, but I still press send on the email. Like,
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
nothing else, I still just sent a little bit of gratitude someone's way who has meant their work has just been special to me, and I just said thank you. And it's like
Hmm.
that matters. Like, it honestly doesn't matter like what other people think about that. Like, that matters. And I can take a deep breath on that.
So you mentioned, you just said in passing, like, will they think I'm okay? And a few moments
Mm,
before that, you mentioned your ADD diagnosis. And I know vulnerability is important to you. It's something that you talk a lot about. Prior to the release of your new book, you talked about the level of vulnerability as you were approaching the writing of this book. But this also coincided with the discovery of the ADD diagnosis. And I remember when you first shared the post, like, I
mm,
just discovered I'm ADD. And there was a little bit of this is me, kind of, I don't even know what this means. I'm just kind of coming to terms with this label that means so many different things to so many different people. And what does it mean for me to own that and be vulnerable about that being a part of who I am? I'm curious, since you first had the lights turned on for you, okay, this is a
yeah.
label that applies to me. And today, what have you learned about yourself in light of that label?
Yes. Yeah. So I started learning about, neurodivergence, I would say during 2020. And at least that term was the first one that kind of, stood out to me. And I was just like, what is this about? And I think it was honestly I think that part too is even just on TikTok. Like, I was just on TikTok, like, just,
Girl, are you gonna make me get
regular.
on TikTok?
Oh,
Oh gosh.
okay, so here's the thing though. TikTok is it's a lot. You have to it's the only way that TikTok works is like you have to treat it kind of like YouTube. Like, you got to go follow, like, subscribe a certain, what the topics you're interested in, cuz it's just, or maybe I'm just old. I don't know. Don't take my advice. Like, just
Okay, do you have
anyway,
a limit? Do
I
you have a limit of time that you try to, like, how
oh,
do you get off? Because
yeah,
that's
of
what I hear about
course.
TikTok is you just get in it and you can't get off.
It's quite a bit. It's quite a bit. I will say I haven't been on it that much lately, actually. I think it was just, especially in 2020, it was just like something to do. Like, it
Right.
was like, oh, just scrolling through, like, show me more. Like, I just need to look at something. So yeah, actually, I'm not even really on it that
Okay.
much anymore, to be honest. But I do follow like lots of therapists and like
Okay.
just mental health related things. That's probably an art. Like, those are kind of my two main categories, and a little sprinkle of comedy. That's kind of where I stay. But I was just learning a lot about
Hmm.
neurodivergence,
Hmm.
and then I started hearing stories about women who were diagnosed with autism as adults, and I was like, wow, that just really connects with me, and also
I'm
ADHD.
sorry. Yeah, I said
And
ADD. I
no,
forgot about the
it's
autism part.
well, yeah, so it's kind of confusing because you have,
It's all on the spectrum. It's all on the
yes,
spectrum.
yes, and then, ASD is what is often used to refer to autism spectrum disorder. But I actually got both. I got all the diagnosis, so I'm like, it still applies. But yeah, when I first learned it, I think for me it wasn't it felt empowering. Like, it didn't feel like a negative label. But
Hmm.
I honestly can say that I think that came from maturity.
Mm.
So it's, I guess, I'm still learning and growing in a lot of areas in my life, but that is an area where I have really matured, because had I come across that same information 10 years ago,
Hmm.
my response would have been, oh, great. Something else that makes me different.
Oh,
Something else
yeah.
that puts me in this other category.
Mm.
Because especially 10 years ago, I was in a lot of spaces where I was one of the only, or one of the few Black people.
Hmm.
I was often, and that's a whole thing in terms of feeling very othered at times, and
Yeah.
just constantly feeling different. I was in a music space and genre where there were not a lot of women either.
Hmm.
So to be a Black woman in that space, there's just a constant feeling of like you're, tokenized or just
Mhm.
made to feel a lot of
Mhm.
times that,
Mhm.
um, and a lot of times it's not even things that are always directly said. It's just like you look around the room and you're just like, I'm the only one here. I'm always just one of the few.
Mhm.
And when you're in your early 20s and you're just trying to make it and do what you feel like you've been called to do, it's like for me, I don't know how I would have dealt with here's yet another thing that
Mhm.
makes you stand out.
Mhm.
I think I would have just kind of kept it to myself. And if even if I did go to a therapist, I probably wouldn't have shared it online. I wouldn't have
Mm.
talked about it because I'm like, great, here's another thing,
Mm.
another thing. So I think the difference with finding out that information now is that I feel like I've walked through enough situations to realize that amidst all of that feeling of being othered or being different or
Mm.
too different, somehow the light still gets through. Somehow art still comes forth. Something
Mm.
beautiful happens. So I have that to go on now. And I feel like that's how I went into that whole experience of like, I don't know how other people are going to respond to this. Like, I don't know if I'm going to get, hit with like a wave of people who are trying to pray it out of me or, or a whole bunch of people who are trying to like be like, oh, that's no big thing,
Yeah.
or you're just doing that because you have a blue check on Instagram. Who knows? I'm
Right.
like, I don't know what might happen. But at the same time, like, I can see in not only my life, but in other people's lives of just, oh wow, like that doesn't stop you from becoming who you're meant to be. It's like yes, there are going to be some people who just don't understand. There's even going to be people who are just committed to misunderstanding you or committed to misunderstanding a diagnosis or what that might mean, and or who want to, like I had when I did share on Instagram, I had somebody that we've known for years, like longer than we have, like I think since we've been married or around that time. We've known this like over a decade. They've known me, been around them a lot. And when I shared, they actually DM'd my husband and they were like, I'm so sorry about Morgan. Like, I'm so
Girl,
sorry.
tell me who they are so I can fight your battles. Oh my gosh.
Like, I'm
Are you
still
serious right
alive.
now?
I'm still here. So yeah, it was, and that was
Wow.
one. There were some others.
Girl.
My parents had people calling them saying like she doesn't need to be talking about that. Like that's gonna ruin her life. And I was just like, what? So yeah, there
Wow.
was some of that, but there were also there were also you remember how I said like if I got that information 10
Yes.
years ago, so that
Yes.
I would have been 21. There were also 21-year-old,
Mhm.
22-year-old,
Mhm.
23-year-old young Black women sending me emails saying thank you.
Mhm.
And just saying thank you for sharing that
Mhm.
because now I feel empowered
Mhm.
to seek help. And that to me makes it worth it. Just whatever anyone else says, I'm like, oh, doesn't matter anymore.
Mhm.
I'm like,
Mhm.
because that's what 21-year-old, 22-year-old Morgan would have needed. And
Mm.
to just, yeah, so that's kind of been my story with it. And it's something that I just try to remember, you know, on because there are times where I do feel like, oh, am I too different? Am I too much? Am I too this? Am I too that? So it's like, I just try to remember. And there are other people who feel that way too.
Mhm.
And when those opportunities come for you to speak to that, those people will be seen.
Other. You said I'd feel othered again. And the thing is, when you think about all the papers that we filled out in our lifetime for applying for this or traveling to this place, there's always a
Mhm.
box for other. And I
Yeah.
think, part of embracing whatever other means is also embracing the fact that other is a valid box to check. Like it's not
Mm,
something that's not an option. It actually is an
yeah.
option. And it means that, I mean, this is just somebody else needs to hear this. I know you probably don't, but that other is something that it's just indicating there's something that's so unique about who you are. It hasn't been captured in volume enough to create an identifiable box, but you can be
Mm,
identified by your other. The key is, and what you were saying in your 20s, you would have done something different with the other realization and diagnosis or whatever, is that you have to hold on to the beauty of other when you haven't even defined it. And just accept
mhm,
that as you move through your life and discover who you are and discover more about the gift of you in this world, that is, you are able to put words to your other, describe your other, share your
mhm,
other, that your level of comfort with describing your other will grow. And then that's all that really matters. But you have to get through that season of life where other feels like I don't fit, and
mhm,
accept the fact that other means I just fit. I can't exactly tell you how to identify me because I'm so special. And we know that there was no box for Morgan. There was no box for the artist whose words and whose art is going to change a generation. You don't put that into another box. And we wouldn't wanted to have put that in another box. But we just now, a decade later, 15 years later, outside of your 20s, now we can say, oh, this is the girl who reads people's letters and then writes response letters that impact the thousands of people who felt just like that person, and then has the unique and canny ability to not just do that with words, but to sway our eyes and our emotions with her pen and her colors and her art, digital or manual as well. That is not a box, and we would never have wanted it to be. And I think every other person who feels other needs to know that not being in a box is still a valid box to check, and to
mhm.
not apologize for that. I would love to know, with your diagnoses over the last year, what do you think, with your growing knowledge and development of your knowledge about this spectrum situation,
Mhm.
what is something that you think would be helpful for someone who may be ill informed to know?
Mm, that's such a good question. That's such a good question. Um, I would say that there are a lot of stigmas out there as to what particularly autism is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to consider that even when you're Googling and you're looking around, a lot of the information that you're reading, it's changing. It's slowly changing. But historically, especially, over the past 10, 20 years or so, a lot of the information out there was written on studies that were done by young white boys.
Yep.
So, especially if you're talking to someone who doesn't meet that demographic, just consider that autism might look completely different than what you might think. So, one of the most hurtful things that someone could say is that you don't look like someone on the spectrum, or you don't look autistic, or you
Mm-hmm.
don't act autistic. But I just saw you do X, Y, and Z. You're on stage, you're doing this, you're doing that. How could you, what do you mean you don't have, the energy or the capacity to go hang out with us or do whatever it is? It's like, you may never know. That person may not even have the language to explain that to you. But I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the greatest gifts that we can give is just that, honestly, that respect for diversity, even diversity, that neurodiversity that we may not even be able to
Mm-hmm.
understand,
Mm-hmm.
and to recognize this is probably something that is going to be get talked about more and more and more as the years go on. I've already started to see negative comments of people saying like, "Oh, everyone's just getting diagnosed now." It's like, yeah, because we have entire demographics of people who have been looked over
Mm.
by all kinds of healthcare systems for years. So yes, you probably are going to hear way more people saying, "Hey, guess what I found out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, guess what I found out? Hey, hey." It's like, yeah, there's probably going to be more of that because there's a whole bunch of us who have walked into doctors for different things that aren't even related to neurodivergency and have been told there's nothing wrong with you, you're fine, just do this, just do that, and essentially get out of my office. So
Mm.
there's more and more people who are getting the help they need. And yeah, some of them are probably going to be excited to talk about it and excited to kind of reclaim that space and say, hey, I'm here. This is who I am. And let's go from there. So, yeah,
That's
I
good.
think that's what I would share.
How was talking about, well, not talking about, but writing this time? I know
Mm,
that for every author, every book is its own journey. Sometimes
mm,
you go into it with a theme, a point, a direction. You may
yeah,
have even thought a little bit about the stories that you want to tell. And then books have a funny way of writing themselves. They start
yeah.
telling you nuances in small ways or in grandiose ways what the messaging is actually supposed to be. I'm curious for this book for you as you talk about peace, even in the midst of so many things that we've all experienced collectively and in your own world, as a mom, a wife, a girl, a millennial, an artist, a creative, a business owner. Um, what was this experience like for you this go round? Was it easier? Was it harder? Did you have to have
Mhm.
major divergence from your plan of topic, direction, and chapters, or did it flow? I'd love to know how that worked for
Oh
you.
my
If it was a
goodness.
peaceful experience or
Oh,
not.
yes, yes. Oh my goodness. Oh, the irony of writing a book about peace. Hardest book I ever wrote. Oh my goodness. I think it was the word count, honestly, because prior to this, I have written what are called gift books, and the gift
Yeah.
books are, there's color, there's poetry, there's a lot more, going on that. In a way, I can kind of like, I'm like, okay, I've written my poems. Like, I wrote a few short prose pieces, and all right, here's this book. But this book was just a lot of like chapter one, chapter two, chapter three. That's the first time I've done that. So, so much respect to someone such as yourself, because I'm just getting started over here. And I think the hardest part of it all was not the actual writing, and even the outlining was fun. I actually enjoyed that part of it. Like, I liked like saying, oh, I can talk about this and go into that and talk about the history and move through that. The hardest part was owning my own voice and allowing myself to believe that my story was worth being told.
Mm,
I read a lot of books. Like, I love to read.
mm,
And anyone who reads knows this. It's like you encounter like the depths of people, like the stuff that they may not have even told these stories to their family yet. And they're like in the book, and you're encountering like some real serious stuff.
mm,
And it's very hard to feel that my life a lot of times is the real serious stuff, and that it is worth putting on paper, of like, is this interesting enough? Is this dramatic enough? And is this enough? It kind of keeps coming back to that. Um, so honestly, I would say that what helped me actually get through it is, which is what the book is about, is just recognizing that, you know what? There are going to be some valleys in this life. There are going to be some mountains, and and you're going to travel through those mountains and valleys, but you're also going to travel through some flat terrain. And you might have to stand there a little bit longer to see the beauty and the depth in that flat terrain. So, I would say like something like, I would see a lot of my childhood for me would be that flat terrain. It feels kind of like I had a good childhood. I'm just like,
yeah.
we didn't go to Disney every year, the mountains, but I also, I was supported at home. I felt safe at home, and
Mm,
that was huge. So I had to kind of sit there longer to see, oh, maybe what I see is like neutral ground. There actually is some depth here. There are some layers, but I just had to kind of be here a little bit longer. So that was one of the biggest lessons that I think I learned, and I would love to share with other people who may feel that their story is not enough, either high or low.
mm,
It's like you just might have to spend a little bit time there. So I literally had to start with, and it's a lot in the book. I had to start with the images. I had to start with, okay, let's not just get intellectual about what peace means, but what were the childhood images that I
mm,
associated with peace? And for me, it was a river, because I learned the song "It Is Well With My Soul" as a young kid,
mm,
when peace like a river. And that's right at the beginning of the book. So that to me sit and listen and let this book kind of breathe to life.
Yeah, right on the back cover it says, breathe in the beauty of the present moment, release everything outside of your control, and exhale peace. And right after that, it says, if you feel overwhelmed by life, you're not alone. A lot of us, I think, I'll speak for myself, I know that some will agree, we thought we had peace. What we had was a predictable rhythm. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't so much that we were operating with inner peace before the pandemic. We just knew what to expect. And what the
Yeah.
pandemic exposed for many of us is that without rhythms being created for us, without expectations being put on us, that in us, we actually
Mm-hmm.
had no peace at all. And when we were left to ourselves, with or our families, whoever we lived with nothing outside to distract, because the rhythms
Yeah.
can actually distract. What we
Mm-hmm.
realized is we were totally and utterly not at peace. And then we were
Mm-hmm.
on top of that overwhelmed by all of the
Mm-hmm.
external things that were now very unpredictable. So I think
Mm-hmm.
what this pandemic has done, I know it's done it for me and it's done it for a lot of the people that I know, is it ripped the band-aid off of something that actually needed light and needed healing. And we have this choice now to deal with it. If someone
Yeah.
is not at peace, or cannot find a way to settle back into what they thought they had before in terms of peace, experiencing the lack of equilibrium is actually a gift because it
Mm-hmm.
calls you to a true source, a piece of practice, a practice of peace. So I would love to know, like for you, as you wrote this book and you're looking at your life and saying, okay, I want to live vulnerable. I want to acknowledge that we all are having to experience some level of vulnerability if we're going to be honest and get what we need. What did you realize that you needed in order to have peace that maybe you did not have, had not practiced, or maybe had
Mm-hmm.
stopped practicing that you needed to put back into place? What did the book
Mm.
teach you as you wrote it?
Yes. Yes. It taught me to slow all the way down.
Yes.
And whatever I think slowing down is,
Slow down
if I
more.
think it's slow down more, double it, triple it. It is astonishing to me, even still after writing the book, how fast, how quickly I can become uncomfortable
Mm,
with slowing down
mm,
and stillness. Just this morning, I was complaining about something that was going to take about 5 months to come to life. 5 months. Feels like forever. I'm like, I don't have 5 months. I need 5 days. I'll settle for 5 weeks. I don't have 5 months. And I think about that and I'm like, that's something I said out loud. But how many things
mm,
internally
mm,
am I just so restless about because I can't slow down? I am so focused on moving quickly, moving faster. And one of the things that I try to encourage other people who may also relate to that is that it's not your fault. Like we live in a world that moves so fast,
always
and it's
rushing.
not just moving fast because of Instagram. Like it's like we have been on a trajectory of efficiency and productivity for centuries.
Mm.
It's like this isn't something that just popped up because Mark Zuckerberg invented Facebook. Like that's one thing I'm just like, I'm sorry, I'm a millennial, but I'm gonna say that. I'm like, we millennials didn't invent that. Like we
Right,
didn't
right.
invent moving quickly and everyone following each other. It's like, no, the reason why these platforms worked is because we were heading that direction in a long
Anyway,
time.
right.
And it's like, if you look at that, if you look at the way, even countries are built, it's like, let's just see how much cheap labor can we get to like build a whole bunch of buildings. It's like, this
Mm,
stuff is baked into society.
mhm,
And we have to, one, recognize that,
mhm,
but two, be open about speaking about it and saying, hey, you know what? Things are really hard right now. There's a lot on a lot of people's shoulders right now.
mhm,
So let's all work together to release some pressure.
mm,
And I think that what that looks like in a practical daily life, it's very relational. It's
mhm,
like who in your life can you talk to on a regular basis to work through, like, what can we do to alleviate some of that pressure? Maybe it's someone you're like, oh, we get together, every Thursday. Oh, I don't feel like doing it. Maybe it's talking to them. Maybe we do every other Thursday now, or one Thursday a month. And I think that is one of the gifts, honestly, of autism, is that it teaches me to, I have to learn a lot of social norms of, like,
Mhm.
oh, if someone wants to go out for coffee, it's kind of like a little audition for regular coffees. Like, I had to learn that because I remember, like, going to coffee with people. I was like, oh, that was great. I'm like, when are we doing this again? I'm like, oh, I didn't even factor that part in. Like, I was just like, I thought this was the moment in time, but I'm like, oh, friendship. Yep, that's the thing. You get together I'm like, I have to learn all that stuff. So for me, I'm just very aware of that. I'm like, there's a whole lot of stuff we're doing out here, y'all. And it's wearing us down, and it's making us feel more and more overwhelmed. And it's disturbing us of peace.
Mhm.
So it gets really practical. Hence pieces of practice, which I write about.
I
It's
love it.
really practical. What can we practice taking off? What loads can we practice taking off? We might not be able to do it as a clean sweep in one day and just everything is just great and we have no more stressful responsibilities. What can we practice? It's like, maybe I can take this one day off, and let's see if it leads to 2 days and
Mhm.
3 days.
Mhm. I
And
was
that's, yeah.
recently I was recently with a group of women who it was a trip, a leadership retreat, and one of the ladies, this was her third time to come. It was all the way in Hawaii. So this is women who are mothers, wives, sisters, who have businesses, who have community involvement, who leave to go
Mm.
sit by themselves or sit in a small group on a beach to talk about whatever they need to talk about. So I asked this woman, it was her third time. I said, what, you've come 3 times. So what, I mean, like, it's like, what is it? And this is me having not
Yeah.
done it before. She said, when I finally gave myself the gift of grace and peace to create space where no one needed anything from me. And I thought it was so indulgent to give that care to myself. The thing is, when I got back home, that piece had a product. It
Mm.
allowed me clarity of mind. It gave me the gift of pacing. All of a sudden, I could make decisions. And she said the reason why I came back a second time
Wow.
is because my husband said, whatever that was that you did, go do it again. So this idea of
Wow,
practicing
I love
peace
that.
is a
Yes.
gift. It's not just a
Mhm.
gift to ourselves. It's a gift to actually
Mhm.
the work that we're called to do and the people that we're called to serve and love. And you talk about so many of the angles of the practice of peace: rhythm, wholeness, community, conversation, journaling, grief, healing, letting it out, letting it go, planning, trusting that there are all of these practical tentacles to what it looks like to walk
Mhm.
with peace. And so if you don't know who Morgan Harper Nichols is, you probably live in a place where there's no internet. But assuming that you know who she is, if you have just enjoyed her art and have never picked up her product, her book, or if you don't have her app, I love her app. I pay for it annually, and I love all of the
Oh,
gifts
thank you.
of her grace that come in that app. If you have never invested in Morgan's work, please go pick up this book. It's called Peace as a Practice, an invitation to breathe deep and find a new rhythm of life. Pick up the book, download her app, and let the journey that she is on and the lessons that she is learning speak to you. Morgan, if they could follow you anywhere, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you're
Mhm.
everywhere. Even your website is Morgan Harper Nichols. But if you were like, if you're going to only follow me in one place, where do you want them to go? Where should they go?
Oh, I would say Pinterest, actually.
Because that's where this
Yes,
all started. You were
right?
pinning stuff
That's
and then
where
it
it
just got,
all started.
yeah.
Yeah, because on the topic of slow, and this is not like,
Yes.
I'm on all the platforms,
No, do
but
it. Do it.
on the topic of slowness, I've been thinking about that a lot because, I'm like, some of these, not all these platforms are the same. And for whatever reason, Pinterest just, it feels just a bit more
Yeah,
slower pace. I'm
it
not saying
does.
it's the slowest pace, but it's a bit more slower pace, and with what I share, I really hope that people can encounter it in a way that gives them that permission to just slow down a little bit. So yeah, if I had to pick one, that's the one that I would say.
Okay. I love it. Listen, girl, and I love you, not just because you do good
Same.
work in the world, but I think, again, all of this, all of it, is flowing from you being willing to be vulnerable enough to respond to the questions that you get from your heart. And then to be vulnerable enough, because to share your art is to be vulnerable. To do that, combining the lessons that you want to share, the encouragement that you want to give, with art that it's coming, it's just an overflow of who you are, and putting all of that out there for us to resonate with, to enjoy, but to also be encouraged by. And so I really appreciate your example. I love you for sharing who you are and letting us benefit from that at the risk of your own vulnerability. I mean, vulnerability sometimes costs, and I just want to appreciate the cost that you pay to share the beauty of your vulnerability with us.
Well, thank you so much. It really is an honor to share, and that means a lot to hear. So thank you.